In your experience, is there a difference between women and men?
Of course. I think we learned this at a very young age, watching even 12 and unders play. Going through puberty causes irreversible advantage, that no matter the training, no matter the diet, no matter any alterable change you can make, will overcome that male advantage, especially in sports like swimming, where lung capacity matters so much. Even something as silly as throat size, men have on average a 40% larger throat, which sounds like it's nothing, but when you're grasping for air, that 40% larger throat makes a huge difference in athletic success, not to mention height. You guys know the differences.
Ms. Robinson, do you agree with Ms. Gaines that there's a difference between women and men?
Okay, so you just saw that clip. If that didn't get your blood boiling, I don't know what will. We're going to watch the full thing together, and I promise you, it gets even more intense. Before we dive in, though, what you just witnessed is Senator Ted Cruz doing something politicians almost never do anymore, asking a straight question and demanding a straight answer. And the fact that he had to ask the same question 5, 6, 7 times and still couldn't get a yes or no, that tells you everything you need to know. Riley Gaines stood in front of Congress and told her story calmly, factually, and with zero self-pity. The trophy, the official, the whole embarrassing situation. That takes real guts, especially for someone who has already been mobbed and vilified just for speaking up. Now, this channel is about honest conversation. You don't have to agree with everything you see here. But I think most people, regardless of where you fall politically, can agree that fairness in sport is not a radical idea. It is the foundation of sport. So hit that like button if you believe women's sports deserve to be protected. Subscribe if you're new and you appreciate content that doesn't shy away from the hard conversations. And let's watch the rest of this together.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Title IX was a landmark civil rights law. It helped create the incredible breadth of women's sports and girls' sports that we see across the country. I believe in girls' sports. I believe in women's sports. I'm the proud father of 2 daughters who are both athletes. I think participating in competitive sports is a wonderful thing for a young girl. I think it is a wonderful thing for a woman. And I think, unfortunately, today's Democrat Party has decided that women's sports and girls' sports no longer matters, and they're willing to push radical legislation designed to destroy girls' sports and women's sports. Ms. Gaines, I want to thank you for your courage. You are relatively young, but you have demonstrated incredible courage. And because you have dared to speak up, you have been demonized, you have been vilified. I saw when you were attacked by a leftist mob at San Francisco State University for daring to speak up. You had an incredible record as a swimmer at the University of Kentucky. You were a 2-time NCAA All-American. You were a 5-time SEC champion. You're an SEC record holder and a 2-time Olympic trial qualifier. But yet on March 27th, 2022, something changed. What happened on March 17th, 2022?
That's when Thomas and I raced in the 200 freestyle and again resulted in a tie.
And so you tied. What was the consequence of tying?
We went behind the awards podium where typically you're handed your trophy, you're marched out, you're named an All-American. And so we go back there and the official looks at both Thomas and myself and says, "Great job, but you guys tied. And we only have 1 trophy, therefore we're giving this trophy to Leah." And I question this and I say, why? And at first I shortened it in my testimony, but really he stumbled on his words. He didn't know how to answer this. And at first he's, well, we're just doing this in chronological order. To which I further pressed, and I said, okay, well, what are you being chronological about? Because we tied. And if we're doing this off alphabetical order, G comes before T, so what are you being chronological about? To which this wasn't a script they had prepared for him. And he actually appreciated his honesty. He did say, we have to give the trophy for Leah because Leah has to have it for pictures. They've made that clear. Leah has to have the trophy for pictures. You can pose with this trophy, but you have to give yours back. You have to go home empty-handed. Leah Thomas takes the trophy home. End of story.
Now, let me ask you, as someone who's competed at the elite level, In your experience, is there a difference between women and men?
Of course. I think we learn this at a very young age watching even 12 and unders play. Going through puberty causes irreversible advantage that no matter the training, no matter the diet, no matter any alterable change you can make will overcome that male advantage, especially in sports like swimming where lung capacity matters so much. Even something as silly as throat size, men have on average a 40% larger throat, which sounds like it's nothing, but when you're grasping for air, that 40% larger throat makes a huge difference in athletic success, not to mention height. You guys know the differences.
Ms. Robinson, do you agree with Ms. Gaines that there's a difference between women and men?
If the question is about trans women,
I'm just asking, is there a difference between women and men?
I mean, what I can say is that the NCAA has rules in place. They've had rules in place for the last decade, and when this competition happened,
I'm going to try again.
the rules were clear.
Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? It's a yes/no question. Do you believe there's a difference?
Oh, I think that we're talking about this case with the NCAA.
No, I'm asking a question. Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? Most people could answer this very simply. I'm curious if you're willing to do so.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just putting it into the context of the conversation that we're having. I think that there are definitions related to sex.
Is
but
that
I
a
also
yes?
think
So I'm
that
trying to
when
get a yes or no. I'm not trying to get a speech.
Is
there a difference between women and men?
I think that there are definitions for biological sex.
Okay, so you're
which
not
is
answering
different
that.
than
Let me
gender.
ask you this question then. Why do women's sports exist? If you can't define a difference between women and men, why not abolish women's sports and just tell little girls to swim with little boys and see who wins?
Oh, I'm simply saying that that sex is
My
different
question,
than gender.
why
and I do believe
why
that
do
women's
women's
sports have a great
exist?
value. I mean, Senator, I'll tell you right
Ms.
now.
Robinson, please answer the question I'm asking you.
Absolutely.
Why do women's sports exist?
I think that there are so many positive benefits to sports.
But
I mean,
why have a
we've talked
separate
about it here
category for
today.
women? If there's no difference between women and men, why to have women's sports?
I'm saying that there's a difference between sex and gender, and that the NCAA has rules in place, which they have for the last decade.
Mr. Chairman,
which
I would
determine
like to enter into
related
the
to
record an
participation.
article from Duke Law called Comparing Athletic Performances for the Best Elite Women to Boys and Men. And it goes through examining in 2017 the top records for women in the world in various track and field events. So, for example, in the 100-meter, the top record for women in the world was 10.71 seconds. Now, that record for the number one woman in the world in 2017 was, in the year 2017, broken by 124 boys under 18. In that same year, the record for the number one competing woman in the 100-meter dash in the world was broken by a total of 2,474 men. If the radical Democrat agenda to destroy girls' sports and women's sports succeeds, little girls will not have a chance to compete. So I ask unanimous consent that this article be entered into the record.
All right. We just watched the whole thing. There is a lot to unpack here. Let's start with Riley Gaines because she deserves the most respect in that room. This is a woman who trained her entire life. 2-time NCAA All-American. 5-time SEC champion. SEC record holder. 2-time Olympic trials qualifier. She gave years of blood, sweat, and early mornings to her sport. And on one of the biggest days of her collegiate career, she tied for a trophy and was sent home empty-handed. Not because she didn't earn it, but because the official literally admitted that Leah Thomas needed it for pictures. For pictures. That moment alone should make anyone stop and think. You have an official telling a decorated female athlete that her achievement matters less than someone else's photo opportunity. That is not inclusion. That is erasure. Then we get to Senator Cruz and Ms. Robinson, and this is where it gets truly remarkable. Cruz asked one of the simplest questions in the English language. Is there a difference between men and women? Yes or no? And Ms. Robinson, sitting in front of Congress, could not say yes. She kept pivoting to NCAA rules, to context, to the difference between sex and gender. Anything to avoid a straight answer. I want to be fair here. I understand gender identity is a sensitive topic, and I am not here to be cruel to anyone. But this was not a question about gender identity. It was a question about biological sex. And the reason that distinction matters, the reason women's sports exist as a separate category, is precisely because of that biological reality. Cruz made that point perfectly when he said, why do women's sports even exist if you cannot define a difference between men and women? And Ms. Robinson had no answer. Because there is no good answer if you refuse to acknowledge basic biology. Then came the data. The Duke Law article Cruz submitted had numbers that are honestly staggering. The women's world record in the 100-meter dash was beaten by 124 boys under 18 in a single year, and by over 2,000 men in that same year. That is not an attack on women. That is the exact reason we have a women's category in the first place. What frustrates me most is this. The people who should be the loudest defenders of women's sports are now refusing to answer basic questions about what a woman is. And the athletes, the Riley Gaineses of the world, are paying the price for that. Cruz came in prepared. He had the data, the timeline, the specifics. He gave Riley Gaines space to tell her story with dignity. And then he calmly and methodically exposed the dishonesty on the other side of the argument. Whether you like Ted Cruz or not, and I know opinions are mixed, what he did in that room was hold people accountable. And we need a lot more of that. So where do I land? I believe women's sports are worth protecting. I believe female athletes deserve fairness. I think Riley Gaines is brave for speaking up when staying quiet would have been so much easier. And I think when a sitting official cannot answer whether men and women are different, something has gone seriously wrong. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Cruz go too far? Was there a point Ms. Robinson made that deserved more credit? Let's talk about it. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button. I will see you in the next one.